operatives to your stations. This is not a drill. All operatives to your stations. This is not a drill. All operatives to your stations. This is not a drill. All operatives to your stations.
Okay, I guess I'm just gonna run through all the stoplights.
Mission calls. I will be back, my love.
This is not a drill. All operatives to your stations. This is not a drill. All operatives to your stations. This is not a drill.
Mr. Goodplot reporting for duty.
Mr. Goodbots present and accounted for.
Mr. Goodhop is here, but physically, not mentally.
And I'm the gorilla, and you're not.
So the crew is all here then. Well, it's time to face the inevitable. Put him up on screen. Greetings, my master. The antagonist?
Good plot. We are just inches away from receiving the go-ahead to finally invade the Geekvolution channel.
Do you realize they're watching us right now?
They've accepted their fates. But if we keep playing their little game beyond the goal point, we might as well make it more beneficial to your job as my henchman.
Look under your chair.
The Toy Story movies? But they've been dissected by just about every reviewer on the internet, even by Captain Logan under the guidance of a wizard.
But you are going to review exclusively the villainy of the series. There is no discrimination when it comes to studying the art of antagonism. Now, if you excuse me, I have some personal business I must tend to.
Well then.
I think it goes without saying that the Disney Pixar trilogy is about a world where toys are sentient while the humans remain unaware.
So with the perspective being from the toys, the sources of villainy come from places you wouldn't normally expect from our point of view.
The first film had a punk kid, the second had a toy clerk, and the third had daycare toys.
But there's a lot more to it than that. I believe that each film follows a formula I like to call the trifecta of villainy.
First, there's the primary villain, then there's the secondary villain, who is usually there to serve the primary villain, and finally there is the false villain, which is a character that is meant to be perceived as a villain until a twist that reveals otherwise. For the first Toy Story, the primary villain is Sid. The toys care about their owners, who care for them back even if it's not in the same way. So Sid is the embodiment of the lack of care for toys. This undisciplined preteen who would otherwise be regarded as simply a nuisance is depicted here as the personification of death. The secondary villain is Sid's dog. Makes sense, toys wouldn't like to be chewed, so let's get over to the false villains, a group of toys mutilated by Sid. At first they come off as these Frankenstein monsters, but they actually retained their rationality and aligned themselves with our hero toys Buzz and Woody to overthrow Sid. So most of the villainy in this movie is on Sid's shoulders. So if you forget to look at this through the toy's perspective, you'll keep thinking this bratty little kid does not deserve such a prestigious mantle of the bringer of death. But what if he has this mantle not just because of the point of view?
Now, this might sound a little twisted.
But if Sid really does take full joy in destroying toys, then what's to stop him from moving to animals, and then later moving to people? So when the toys break the number one rule by revealing their sentience to Sid, thus scaring him straight, the heroes may have accomplished more good than we realized, because they prevented another Jeffrey Dahmer. Now let's move on to Toy Story 2, where the human villain is Al, a sleazy owner of a toy store. Wait a minute, he's portly, he has glasses, wears costumes, collects toys, falls asleep eating Cheetos in front of the TV?
Oh God, I'm slowly becoming Al!
Does that mean that I'm becoming the jackalope from Boundin'? But you're not a thief.
Oh yeah, I do not go that way of villainy. But Al did. He tried to steal Woody.
Not only that, but the main trait he displayed was his greed for money. People who buy and sell toys as a living is a very common thing now and then. So it's certain that most of them are not this big of jerks. Though a lot of jobs tend to get antagonized all the time. We know that not all corporate CEOs are evil. That doesn't mean we'll stop using them as villains, though. But he could have been enough without the criminal level of desperation, because he's merely our secondary villain. The primary villain was a toy this time, Stinky Pete the Prospector. Even though Al got the ball rolling by wanting to sell Woody to a museum overseas, Pete manipulates Woody into accepting it, using the guise of a kind-hearted mentor. So when he reveals his true colors, not only is he willing to take apart Woody, but he's also a racist. The way he uses the term space toys is as if he's using a racial slur against Buzz.
Pete, you are on the wrong side of history.
And that leaves us with Toy Story 2's last villain, Buzz's arch-nemesis, Emperor Zurg, the coolest of these villains. Well, coolest looking.
Of course, I have his action figure.
That's not Zurg, that's Death's Head.
Close enough.
So after his glorious setup in the first film, along with the setup at the beginning of this film, it turns out he's our false villain. The twist is not that he's good the whole time, it's that he's stupid the whole time. Apparently all toys from the Buzz Lightyear line start out being delusional. But it's okay, a Saturday morning cartoon series was produced as what the Buzz Lightyear line would have been based on. This was where Zurg was utilized as primary villain. Granted, it was just for 2 seasons, but still, I sabered it. So now we've come to Toy Story 3, where the primary villain this time is Lotso Huggins Bear.
And he feels like just a copy of the last one.
Both Stinky Pete and Lotso are heavy-set. Both pretend to be mild-mannered elders before showing their true nature. Both have tragic pasts that made them doubt any loyalty humans would have over toys. And both receive their comeuppance, in which they're taken by a new owner who has an unconventional way of treating their toys. But they do have their differences. Pete was never owned in the first place, so he never had sympathy for toys who refused to let their owners go. Lotso was owned, but was lost and then replaced. That feeling of rejection drove him to demand dominance over all toys at a daycare. Maybe I would have thought that Lotso was more unique if they had gone with the original concept for him. Apparently, in the early stages of this film, Lotso was a malfunctioned Teddy Ruxpin who took out his frustration on other toys by forming a whole gang of toy terrorists.
That would have been the best thing ever.
he still has a gang, which serves as our false villains. They're the toys most useful to Lotso, so he grants them sanctuary in the kindergartner room. As for the toys he deems useless to him, they're imprisoned in the preschooler room to suffer and eventually die. I know it's a bit on the nose, or under it. The gang learns from the new toys the error of their ways. Really? All of them at the same time? Couldn't there have been one or two that still needed some convincing?
Going back to Lotso, you could make a case that the primary and secondary antagonists are switchable in this situation.
Throughout the trilogy, we've seen all kinds of threats that toys would always have to deal with. But the be-all, end-all threat is being discarded as junk and thrown into a landfill. So the villainy of Toy Story goes out with a bang, using an inescapable fire pit to show that no matter what, death is inevitable. Unless you have Squeak Toy aliens. We also get cameos from past villains. Zurg is one of the newest toys of the Redeemed Daycare, and Sid shows up presumably to show us that the lesson he learned stuck, at least in his subconscious, since he became a garbage man instead of a serial killer.
But is there not more after the trilogy?
I do not recall any of the short films having villainy.
So let's skip to the holiday specials.
Spoiler alert for anyone who cares! Both the Halloween and Christmas specials contain villains, but they mostly feel like reused ideas. Toy Story of Terror had a sleaze who steals and sells toys, which we've already seen. And Toy Story That Time Forgot had a group of fierce toys who were neglected by their owners, which is also something we've already seen.
But those are just harmless cash-ins that are not required viewing.
It's the upcoming fourth movie that I hope stays clear of retreading any old ground and find something new for this world to offer, since the fourth installment is coming regardless of a logical story conclusion. But we should at least look back at what made the previous villains memorable first. The original film kept things simple. You never needed to know that much about Sid. Sure, there was stuff here and there about his family, but all we needed to know was that he loved breaking toys, and that was that. With the second film, it seemed that we were getting another simplified villain with Al. He loves money, there you go. But then we were in for a pleasant surprise when it turned out the actual primary villain, Pete, had more dimension to him, complete with a backstory and a more intricate motivation. But it seemed that Pixar thought if it worked before, it would work again. So they devoted even more time to the backstory and motivation of the third film's villain, Lotso. It felt like they tried too hard this time, and just gave the film more to juggle than it already had with the theme of saying goodbye to your beloved toys. The villain that saved it for me in that film was the one without a face, because it was more of an idea that the whole story was building towards. So as we forcibly look to the future, the amount of background and motivation for a villain should depend on what story you're telling. Keep in mind you have to balance everything about the villain with everything else you've got in your movie. Oh, and I forgot one more source of villainy. Misunderstandings! Good God, these toys are so quick to turn on each other at the slightest suspicion. Gentlemen, you are losing sight of the real villains when you do that.
Calculating villainy score of Toy Story 1, Toy Story 2, and Toy Story 3.
I have returned, hopefully to a finished report.
Mr. Goodbot was just in the middle of calculating the total score.
Overall percentage calculated.
Good. But if you really wish to continue being a supervillain, then prepare yourself for what needs to be done once we invade the enemy's land.
I know.
And you also know what will happen if you lose this opportunity.
Is it still execution?
So you remember.
But what about my comrades?
You say that as if they matter.
Are you seriously gonna keep letting him walk all over you? Only I should have that problem, because I'm a small animal, and it's hard not to step on me.
No, wait. I might be secondary antagonist now, but I have a chance. If we get more chapters, he can't be the primary antagonist for all of them. There's room for me. There's a chance for me to elevate.
You know, I don't really think he needs that eye patch.
Stop with your conspiracy theories!